Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to tell you about the difficult, scarce and challenging days of mother and daughter Huyen. Early in the morning, when the fog still covered the hills, Huyen gently carried Micah out of the small house. She carried a bamboo basket on her back, and Micah obediently hugged her neck. Mother and daughter followed the winding dirt road leading into the mountainous area. The long road with steep slopes and rugged paths made Huyen exhausted, but she still smiled to encourage Micah. After a very long stretch, the morning sunlight gradually pierced through the fog, revealing a vast dragon fruit hill before them. The lush green dragon fruit rows stretched across the hillside, with ripe red and pink fruits peeking under the branches, creating a peaceful and lively scene. Huyen put Micah down, and mother and daughter stood silently, gazing at the large dragon fruit hill. The owner of the dragon fruit garden saw the mother and daughter standing at the entrance and immediately smiled as he approached to greet them. After hearing Huyen explain that she wanted to buy some dragon fruits to sell at the market, he happily agreed and led the two of them along the rows of trees. As they walked, he carefully guided Huyen on how to recognize ripe fruits for picking. He pointed to the fruits with bright red shells, slightly curved stems, and yellowing tips, indicating they were ripe and ready for harvest. Fruits that were still green or light red needed to be left for a few more days. Huyen listened attentively, occasionally nodding to remember each instruction. Micah stood beside her, hugging her leg, curiously watching the owner's hand pointing to the clusters of ripe red dragon fruits on the hillside. After ensuring Huyen understood how to distinguish the ripe fruits, the owner smiled encouragingly and signaled her to start harvesting. Huyen carefully holds the scissors to cut the branch, closely observing a dragon fruit with a bright red peel and some slightly yellowed tips, as the gardener just instructed. She gently cuts the stem and then, with both hands, delicately lifts the dragon fruit and approaches the gardener. Slightly worried, Huyen asks, end quote, "Please help me check if this fruit is ready for harvest?" End quote. The gardener takes the dragon fruit, gently turns it for a thorough inspection, then smiles and nods. End quote. "Yes, this one is ready. You chose very accurately. Picking fruits with this color and ripeness is perfect." End quote. Hearing this, Huyen smiles softly, and all her nervousness disappears. Huyen opened the woven basket she brought, took out a small carefully wrapped knife. She chose a dragon fruit that had been confirmed to be ripe, gently cut it in half, then skillfully peeled off the red outer skin. The red flesh dotted with tiny black seeds appeared, plump and fragrant. Huyen cut it into bite-sized pieces, first offering one to Micah. End quote. "Eat it, the dragon fruit is very sweet." End quote. Micah happily took the piece, took a bite and smiled with delight at the sweet, cool taste. Huyen then cut another piece, politely offering it to the garden owner. End quote. "Try it with my mom and me." End quote. The garden owner smiled and accepted it. End quote. "Thank you. This fruit is beautifully ripe. It will definitely be very delicious." End quote. He took a bite and nodded. End quote. "It and apples. S indeed sweet and juicy. A harvest like this is perfect." End quote. Hearing that, Huyen also cut herself a small piece. She tasted it, the gentle sweetness and coolness spreading across her tongue, making her smile contentedly. Huyen put the small knife back into the bamboo basket, then took the scissors to cut the branches and stood up to begin her work. She slowly walked along each row of dragon fruit on the hillside. Whenever she came across a fruit with a bright red, shiny shell and slightly yellowish tips, Huyen would stop to observe carefully. After confirming the fruit was ripe, she used the scissors to cut the stem neatly, gently supporting the fruit with her other hand to avoid damaging the skin. Each ripe dragon fruit was sequentially placed neatly into the bamboo basket. She patiently walked around the entire garden, meticulously selecting only the ripe fruits for harvest, leaving the greener ones on the plant for future picking. In a corner of the garden, Micah obediently sat in the shade, watching her mother work and smiling encouragingly. The morning atmosphere on the dragon fruit hill was truly peaceful, with only the sound of scissors snipping, mingled with birdsong and a gentle breeze blowing through the lush green rows. In another field, Da was following the dirt path to the labor site. On his shoulder was an old towel used to wipe sweat, and his legs moved quickly past the rice field still smelling of straw after the harvest. When he arrived, in front of him was a rice threshing machine running steadily beside piles of golden rice. He greeted everyone and immediately began working. Da bent down to hold each large bundle of rice, used his strong hands to lift it up, and brought it close to the machine. The machine and Appo's sound echoed across the field, golden rice grains falling one after another, while the straw was pushed aside into piles. Da worked tirelessly from one bundle to another, sweat soaking his back, but he remained diligent. Under the bright morning sun in the field, the image of a man quietly earning a living as a laborer appeared simply. Da only hoped for a little more wages to support his life and help Huyen and Appo's mother and child when needed. Huyen is still diligently working among the rows of dragon fruit stretching across the hillside. She walks slowly, carefully searching for the ripe, plump, bright red fruits. Each time she finds a fruit that is fully ripe, Huyen gently lifts her scissors to cut it, placing it neatly into the bamboo basket. As time passes, Huyen and Appo's basket gradually fills up. She stops, takes a quick look at the harvested dragon fruits, and carefully gathers them into small groups. Then Huyen bends down, using both hands to hold the freshly picked fruits, and slowly walks toward the gathering spot. Under the shade of a tree beside the garden, Micah is sitting obediently, waiting for her mother. Seeing Huyen return, the girl happily stands up and runs over. End quote. Mom, have you harvested a lot? End quote. Huyen smiles, placing the dragon fruits beside her daughter. End quote. A little bit, Micah. End quote. Micah looks at the neatly arranged bright red dragon fruits, her eyes shining with excitement. Huyen then wipes the sweat from her forehead, sits down beside her daughter to rest before continuing her work on the hill. Da is still continuing his work as a laborer. After the rice threshing machine finished each batch, the golden rice grains were gathered into large basins placed beside it. Da bent down, holding each heavy basin of rice with both hands. He approached the open sacks, carefully tilting the basin and pouring the golden rice into them. The sound of rice grains falling into the sacks blended with the noise of the threshing machine echoing across the vast field. As the sacks filled up, Da gently shook them to settle the rice, then neatly tied the openings. Sweat dripped down his face, his hands covered in straw dust, yet he silently kept working from one basin to another. Looking at the sacks lined up along the edge of the field, Da took a deep breath and then turned back to continue helping everyone. Huyen continued to return to the distant rows of dragon fruit to harvest. Her hands had become accustomed to the work. Each time she saw the ripe red fruit, she carefully checked it before lifting the scissors to cut. Before long, she had harvested quite a few dragon fruits. Huyen carried each freshly picked bunch back to the gathering spot where Micah was resting. She gently placed the fruits on the ground and began to arrange them. The large, round, beautiful fruits were carefully selected and neatly placed into a bamboo basket to prevent damage. The bamboo basket gradually filled up, with the pinkish-red dragon fruits stacked on top of each other, creating a beautiful sight. Huyen looked at the full basket, smiling softly at the chungwa of a diligent morning. The remaining fruits were carefully packed into large prepared bags. Huyen tightly sealed the bags and placed them right next to the bamboo basket. Micah sat nearby watching her mother work, eyes full of admiration as she saw her mother had harvested so many dragon fruits. Huyen tightly bound the bag of dragon fruit, then bent down to carry Micah in her arms. One arm held her child, while the other carried the heavy bag of dragon fruit on her shoulder. The path down the hill was steeper than when going up. Each of Huyen and Appo's steps slow but steady. The wind on the hill blew through the lush rows of dragon fruit, while Huyen carefully followed the red dirt trail to bring her child and the bag of dragon fruit down to the gardener and Appo's house. Although her shoulders were tired, she still tried to hold Micah securely in her arms. After a long journey, mother and child finally reached the foot of the hill, where the gardener and Apo's house was nearby. Huyen gently set Micah down beside the bag of dragon fruit she had just carried down. She sat down to straighten her child and Apo's clothes and gently said, and quote, "Micah, sit here and watch over Mom. Mom will go back up the hill to get the basket of dragon fruit. She and Apo's, I'll be back soon." End quote. Micah obediently nodded, sitting close to the bag of dragon fruit, her eyes watching her mother. Huyen gently stroked her child and Apo's head, smiled, then turned around and walked back up the steep path to the hill. Huyen followed the dirt path back to the Long Hill. Her steps were slower because the bamboo basket on her shoulder was full of ripe red dragon fruits. She held the handles of the basket with both hands, trying to keep her balance as she descended the rugged slope. The heavy bamboo basket pressed down on her shoulder, sweat beaded on her face, but Huyen still persisted, taking each step carefully. She looked down towards the foot of the hill, where Micah was sitting, waiting for her mother. After a while, Huyen also reached the bottom. Seeing her mother return, Micah happily stood up and ran over. "Mom is back." Huyen gently placed the bamboo basket on the ground, took a deep breath and smiled at her daughter. Inside the basket were neatly arranged bright red dragon fruits. Micah looked inside with curiosity, while Huyen sat down beside her, wiping sweat from her forehead after the tiring journey. Huyen placed the full bamboo basket of dragon fruits on the scale. The pinkish-red dragon fruits were neatly arranged, looking very attractive. The garden owner stood beside her, checking the quantity while nodding in approval, praising the quality of the fruits Huyen selected. After a moment of calculation, the garden owner announced the amount to be paid for the dragon fruits. She carefully took the money out of her pocket, counted it, and then handed it to the garden owner. "Thank you, Ma and Apo's, Am." The garden owner smiled and replied, "Yes, you work very hard. Come back whenever you need." Huyen happily bowed her head in thanks, then turned to hold Micah and Apo's hand. The girl obediently walked beside her mother. Mother and daughter greeted everyone around, then slowly left the dragon fruit garden. The road ahead led to the market, where Huyen hoped to sell a little more and buy some essentials for daily life. Mother and daughter held hands as they walked under the morning sun, their shadows gradually fading on the dirt road. On the other side of the field, Da had just finished threshing the rice. He bent down to check each bundle of rice, making sure they were neatly packed, then tightly tied the tops to prevent the rice from spilling out. Afterwards, Da took turns carrying each bundle of rice onto the truck for the gardener, the heavy bundles on his shoulders, but he still tried to lift them, arranging them neatly so the truck could carry them away. His hands were covered in straw dust, and his shirt was soaked with sweat after a hard day and Apo's work. When everything was done, the gardener approached and handed Da his wages. Instead of money, today his wage was a bundle of rice. Da carefully took the bundle, tied it again, and slung it over his shoulder. He bowed his head to thank the gardener, then turned and left the field. Da and Apo's shadow slowly walked along the dirt road between the rice paddies, with the bundle of rice he received after a day of work on his shoulder. Despite being tired, his face remained calm, because at least today he had gained some food to bring home. Huyen placed the bamboo basket full of dragon fruits on her shoulder, holding the strap with one hand and gripping Micah and Apo's hand with the other. The mother and daughter continued walking along the long road toward the ferry terminal. The heavy bamboo basket filled with ripe red dragon fruits made Huyen and Apo's shoulders slightly droop, but she still tried to walk steadily. Micah walked beside her mother, occasionally looking up at Huyen and Apo's tired face. "Are you tired, Mom?" Huyen smiled gently and replied, "I and Apo's am fine. We and Apo's almost at the market, dear." The mother and daughter crossed dirt roads, fields, and rows of trees along the roadside. After a long journey, The ferry terminal finally appeared before them. The wide river stretched out, and a small ferry was waiting on the shore to carry people across. Huyen stepped onto the ferry, carefully placed the bamboo basket in a corner, and sat Micah beside her. The ferry gradually left the shore, with the gentle sound of water lapping against the sides. The ferry docked. Huyen gently stood up, took Micah and Appo's hand, and they stepped ashore. The midday sun was already high, and the road ahead was still long, so Huyen decided to find a place for the two of them to rest. Huyen saw a small tent by the roadside, offering shade and quietness inside. She led Micah inside, placed the woven basket down beside her, and sat down to rest. Huyen wiped the sweat from her face with a cloth, then opened the food bag she had prepared in the basket. She took out a boiled egg she brought from home. Huyen gently peeled the egg, layer by layer, and broke it into small pieces. She brought a piece of egg to Micah and Appo's mouth. "Eat it, you must be hungry after the long journey." Micah obediently opened her mouth and ate the pieces that her mother fed her. The girl ate while leaning into her mother and Appo's lap, her face happy to be resting after the long trip. Huyen watched her child eat happily and smiled softly. Huyen and Micah sat inside a small tent, gazing out at the wide river in front of them. After finishing their meal, Micah sat close to her mother, swinging her legs and attentively watching the leisurely flowing water. In front of mother and daughter, the ferry still operated regularly. Each trip to the shore saw people boarding and disembarking, with calls echoing across the peaceful riverbank. The ferry carried villagers, bicycles, and goods from one bank to the other, then returned to pick up those waiting. Huyen leaned against a tent pole, her eyes gazing into the distance along the river. Next to her was a woven basket filled with ripe red dragon fruits. After a hard morning on the hill, this rare moment of rest made her feel more relieved. Huyen sat down to rest for a while to regain her strength, then opened the food bag she brought. She took out a small loaf of bread, broke it in half, and ate slowly piece by piece. After a morning of traveling long distances and hard work, the simple loaf of bread became a precious lunch that helped her regain her energy. After eating, Huyen took a small sip from the water bottle in her bag. She turned to look at Micah and seeing that her child had rested enough, gently asked and quote, "Shall we continue? There and Appo's still a bit to go to the market." End quote. Micah obediently nodded. Huyen packed up the food bag, placed it back into the basket, and stood up. She put on the full bamboo basket of dragon fruit on her shoulder and held Micah and Appo's small hand. Mother and daughter stepped out of the tent and continued along the road toward the market area. The midday sun shone down on the long road, casting their shadows on the ground. Despite many hardships ahead, Huyen still held her child in Appo's hand tightly, walking step by step with Micah toward the place where they hoped to sell the dragon fruits they had diligently harvested. De rides his motorcycle slowly along the familiar village road, with a bundle of rice securely tied in front of the bike. After a day working in the fields, he returns with his efforts, thinking about Huyen and her mother. When the bike stops in front of the house gate, De turns off the engine and gets off. One hand bends down to carry the heavy rice bundle, while the other holds a small bag containing bones, meat, and eggs that he bought. He walks through the bamboo gate and into the yard. As I stepped into the familiar house, De gently placed the bundle of rice straw down. The bundle was heavy after a day of working, representing the effort he exchanged for his hours working in the fields. He then placed the lunch bag on the small bamboo table in the corner of the kitchen. Inside were bones, meat, and eggs he brought, simple things but enough for Huyen and her mother to have a delicious meal. Seeing Pippi happily approaching, its tail wagging gently, De sat down and softly stroked Pippi and Appo's fur. "Were you good today at home?" Pippi looked up, its eyes recognizing De as a familiar face. De smiled and gently patted the little dog on the head. De gently stood up. He looked at the rice sack placed in the corner of the house, bent down and used both hands to lift it. The rice sack was heavy, but with his strength, De still carried it easily on his shoulder and then walked towards the backyard. Outside the garden, the green vegetable beds were still being tended, and a gentle breeze blew, causing the leaves to sway. De walked around to find an empty, flat, and dry patch of land. After choosing a suitable spot, he slowly lowered the rice sack to the ground. De opened the sack, took out a pre-prepared tarpaulin from inside. He held 2 corners of the tarp, gently pulled it, and then spread it out on the ground. The tarp was smoothed flat and neatly placed in the middle of the garden. De pulled the rice husk bag open, slowly lifting handfuls of golden rice to pour onto the pre-laid tarp. The dry rice grains fell, forming a small pile in the garden. When all the rice husk had been poured out, De set the bag aside and sat down next to the tarp. He used his rough hands to gently spread the rice evenly across the surface, so that each layer was thinly spread under the sunlight. De and Apo's slow, deliberate movements flattened the rice that had gathered into piles. He carefully pulled the grains close to the edge of the tarp to help them dry more evenly. The quiet garden was only filled with the sound of the wind blowing through the vegetable beds and the soft rustling of rice under the diligent man and Apo's hands. De looked at the evenly spread golden rice on the tarp and smiled softly. This was the result of a hard day and Apo's work, and also a little hope to nurture his small house and support Huyen and her mother. After a long walk, Huyen and Micah finally arrived at their familiar market. The sounds of buyers and sellers and calls from everywhere made the market more lively. Huyen held Micah and Apo's hand and looked for a suitable spot. She chose an empty piece of land in the market, where there were many passers-by but still enough space to set up her stall. Huyen gently took down the woven basket from her shoulder and carefully placed it on the ground. She took out the plastic bags she brought, spread them flat on the clean ground, and began arranging her goods. Each red-pink dragon fruit was carefully taken out, held with both hands and neatly placed on the bag. The large, round, and beautiful fruits were arranged outward for easy viewing by shoppers. The smaller ones were neatly placed beside them. Soon, a small corner selling dragon fruits for Huyen appeared, with the ripe red fruits standing out under the sunlight. Micah sat beside her mother, obediently watching her arrange the goods. Huyen wiped the sweat from her forehead, looked at the dragon fruits she had worked hard to harvest from the hill, and smiled. I returned to the small house, stepping over the familiar ground where Pippi is resting. I take a small bowl and scoop full of clean water. Carefully, I bring the bowl of water and place it in front of Pippi. Pippi, drink the water. Pippi approaches, bows down, and drinks each sip of water. I sit beside the little dog, gently pat its head, then stand up and go into the kitchen. I take the pot, rinse some rice thoroughly. The white rice grains are gently stirred in water. Then I pour in just enough water and place the pot on the stove. De placed the washed rice pot on the stove and then bent down to pick up the dry sticks that were arranged nearby. He took out a lighter, ignited the dry leaves and small sticks to start the fire. After a while, the flames began to catch on the wood. De gently pushed the sticks further into the stove with a stick, adjusting them to make the fire burn more evenly. Soon, the dry sticks crackled, and the bright red flames flared up at the bottom of the pot. The flickering firelight reflected on De and Apo's face after a hard day and Apo's work, bringing a warm feeling to the small kitchen. De sat down beside the stove, occasionally adjusting the firewood to prevent the fire from going out. The familiar smell of smoke gently filled the space, signaling that a simple meal was gradually being prepared for the afternoon when Huyen and Micah would return. At the market, after Huyen finished arranging the bright red, plump dragon fruits, the first customers also began to arrive. A few passers-by stopped to ask to buy the neatly arranged fruits. One customer bent down to select a few large, round ones and handed them to Huyen. "Help me weigh these, please." Huyen happily took them, placing the dragon fruits on her small portable scale. She carefully adjusted the balance and then announced the weight to the customer. After calculating the price, Huyen received the money from the customer. She counted it very carefully and then put it into her small bag. A gentle smile appeared on her face as the dragon fruits she had worked hard to harvest from the hills started to find buyers. Micah sat beside her watching her mother sell, her eyes focused on each customer. Huyen was selling and gently rearranging the remaining dragon fruits, preparing to welcome more buyers in the busy market. I took the bag containing bones and meat that you just brought home. You opened the bag, took each piece of bone and meat, and placed them into a basket, then took them to the clean water to wash thoroughly. The flowing water passed through your hands, washing away the remaining dirt. I carefully washed each piece of bone and meat, then put everything into the prepared pot. You set the pot aside and stepped out to the backyard. The lush green vegetable bed stretched out, with the late afternoon sunlight gently shining through the leaves. I walked around for a while and saw a large pumpkin lying under the vine. You bent down to observe and saw that the pumpkin was ripe, with a hard green shell, ready for harvest. I gently lifted the pumpkin with my hand and plucked it. Holding the pumpkin in my hand, I smiled. With an additional pumpkin in the garden, I will cook a nourishing bone and pumpkin soup for Huyen. I took the pumpkin back into the kitchen. After the first customers, buyers started to come more frequently. Huyen and Appo's bright red dragon fruits attracted the attention of many shoppers. A customer stopped in front of the small stall of the mother and daughter, bent down to select a few round, beautiful dragon fruits, and then handed them to Huyen. "Help me weigh these," she said. Huyen happily accepted, placed each fruit on the small scale, carefully adjusted it, and then announced the total price to the customer. The customer handed her the money. Huyen took it, counted it carefully, and then stored it in a small bag. After a while, more customers appeared. Some bought a few to take home for their families, others chose the largest ones as gifts. Huyen always gently introduced and selected the best fruits to offer to the customers. Her hands skillfully weighed the dragon fruits, received the money, and then neatly arranged the remaining fruits. Micah sat beside her, happily watching her mother sell, occasionally helping by handing small bags to the customers. The small market corner of the mother and daughter gradually became busier. In the small kitchen, the rice pot had started to run out of water. I opened the lid to check and saw the rice grains had expanded and were almost cooked. I gently pushed the glowing charcoal in the stove to one side with a stick, reducing the fire gradually. I carefully took the rice pot off the high heat and placed it on the warm embers outside the stove. The remaining heat would help the rice cook slowly, making the grains dry and more fragrant. Then I turned to the bone broth pot. I placed the pot on the stove, adjusted its position to keep the fire low for a sweeter broth. The pieces of bones in the pot began to heat up, and a mild aroma spread throughout the kitchen. While waiting for the broth to boil, I took the pumpkin I just harvested from the garden. I held a small knife and started peeling off the green outer skin. The knife slowly glided over the pumpkin, revealing light yellow pieces. The evening light filtered through the kitchen window, and the crackling sound of burning wood blended with the sound of the knife peeling the pumpkin. The next customers took turns visiting Huyen and Appo's small stall. The bright red dragon fruits were increasingly popular among buyers. Customers chose large, beautiful fruits, while Huyen carefully weighed each portion, calculated the price, and received the money from the customers. The bamboo basket, initially full of dragon fruits, gradually became emptier. By the time the market started to thin out, only 2 dragon fruits remained on the paper. Huyen looked at the 2 remaining fruits and gently smiled. She decided to keep them to bring home for Micah and to eat after a long, hard day. She gently wrapped the 2 dragon fruits in a small paper bag, folded it neatly, and placed it into the bamboo basket. Then Huyen took out her money bag, sat down, and counted the money earned today. Each banknote she smoothed and carefully folded. Looking at the money in her hand, Huyen exhaled softly, feeling happier because the effort of her and her daughter today had paid off. She put the money into her bag, slung the bamboo basket over her shoulder, and took Micah and Appos's hand. Let and Appos's go home, my child. Micah obediently stood up and held her mother and Appos's hand. The mother and daughter greeted the vendors around them, and then left the market. Their figures gradually disappeared down the road leading home, carrying the small fruits of a hard day and Appos's work. In the small kitchen, the bone soup pot on the stove started to boil. White bubbles floated to the surface of the pot, and the aroma from the simmering bones spread throughout the kitchen. He heard the boiling water and immediately stepped closer. He took a gourd basket that had been peeled and cut into small pieces, gently picked it up, and poured each piece of gourd into the soup pot. The light yellow pieces of gourd fell and blended with the clear bone broth. He used a spoon to gently stir, ensuring the gourd was submerged in the water, then covered the pot to let the gourd cook slowly until tender. After a while, he opened the lid and tasted a bit of the broth. He added more seasoning, carefully adjusted the flavor. He stirred well, then looked at the steaming pot of soup, a satisfied expression on his face. In the late afternoon, the small road in front of the house echoed with familiar footsteps. Huyen and Micah just passed through the bamboo gate when Pippi, the dog lying outside in the yard, immediately recognized them. Pippi happily ran out to greet them. Seeing the small dog running over, Huyen bent down and picked up Pippi. She stroked Pippi and Appos's fur and smiled, asking, and quote, "Pippi, are you here to pick up Mom today? Were you good at home?" End quote. Pippi lifted its head, looking at Huyen as if wanting to reply. It gently wagged its tail and lay quietly in her arms after a day of waiting. From the kitchen, he heard the familiar voices of the mother and daughter. He was sitting by the stove preparing food when he suddenly turned around. Knowing that Huyen and Micah had returned, he quickly stood up. He straightened his slightly wrinkled shirt after a day of work, lightly wiped his hands and stepped outside. As he reached the yard, he saw Huyen holding Pippi, while Micah stood beside her mother. He smiled and greeted the mother and daughter. And quote, "You and Appos's back? Were you tired on the road today?" End quote. Huyen saw her standing in the yard and was a little surprised. She turned to ask, "Are you here to visit?" He smiled, pointed towards the corner of the garden where the rice was drying, and said, "I brought some rice for Micah. Since I have time today, I'll cook rice for you and Micah to eat together." Huyen looked into the kitchen and saw the rice cooker was already cooked, and the pot of pumpkin bone soup was still steaming. She remained silent for a moment, feeling both surprised and warm inside. "He's helping my family again." He just smiled softly. "It's nothing, you and Micah have been out all day, you must be tired. Coming home to hot rice is enough." Micah, hearing this, ran over to the kitchen and seeing the delicious smell of food, happily said, "Is there soup today, Mom?" Huyen looked at her daughter, then at Da. After a long day of selling goods, the moment returning to the small house with a meal waiting made her feel more at ease. Da saw that Micah still had dirt on her feet after a long day of traveling with her mother. He gently approached and took her small hand. "Come on, I and Appos's. I'll wash your hands and feet. Then you can go eat dinner." Micah obediently nodded, allowing Da to lead her to the small canal in front of the house. The clear water flowed gently over the stones along the bank. Da sat down, washed each of her small hands and feet carefully. He cleaned the remaining dirt on her feet gently and carefully. "Were you tired from traveling today?" Micah shook her head happily and replied, "No, I'm not tired. Today I saw many dragon fruits." Da smiled and gently patted Micah's head. The uncle and niece sat by the small canal under the gentle evening light, a peaceful scene like a family. In the kitchen, Huyen was preparing food for the meal. She looked outside and saw Da patiently caring for Micah like a family member. At that moment, Huyen felt a warm feeling in her heart. After days of just her and her daughter relying on each other to overcome difficulties, Now beside her and Micah was someone who always helped silently. Huyen watched the figures of Da and Micah by the small ditch and gently smiled. In her heart, she silently thanked that man for the simple yet heartfelt things he had done for her and her daughter. After washing Micah and Appo's hands and feet, I took her by the hand and led her to the backyard garden. I guided Micah to the rice drying mat, pointing out the golden rice grains lying under the evening sun as we walked. End quote. This is the rice I received today. It needs to be dried thoroughly so it will cook well later. End quote. Micah sat down, looking at the rice grains with curiosity. She gently touched the shiny golden rice and then smiled. I bent down and started to tidy up. Carefully, I gathered the remaining rice grains on the mat into the center, then pulled each corner of the mat to prepare for storage. The task wasn't Appo's difficult, but the large mat made it challenging to manage alone. Huyen stepped out of the kitchen. She saw Da cleaning up alone and approached him. End quote. Let me help you. End quote. Da was a bit surprised but smiled and nodded. Each of them held a corner of the tarp and gently folded it together. Huyen bent down to gather the rice grains still on the tarp, while Da rolled up the tarp neatly. The evening sunlight cast over the small garden. Micah stood beside her, watching her mother and Da work together, while Pippi lay nearby quietly observing. A simple moment, but for Huyen it brought a sense of peace that she hadn't Appo's felt in a long time. In the small kitchen, Huyen was preparing dinner. Da carried a bundle of rice on his shoulder. The rice bundle, recently dried, was heavy, but Da still walked slowly into the house and neatly placed the bundle in the corner of the kitchen. He lightly dusted his hands and said to Huyen, end quote, this few kilograms of rice, leave it for Micah to eat. End quote. Huyen looked at the rice bundle, then at Da, a feeling of gratitude rising in her heart. End quote. You work hard and still bring rice home for me and the kids. You help us so much. End quote. Da just smiled softly. End quote. Just a little. Micah is still young, so save some rice for when she needs to cook. End quote. Huyen looked at the man in front of her, saying nothing more. She only nodded slightly, her eyes shining with appreciation. Da looked at the sky, which was gradually getting dark, saw Huyen and Micah had returned safely, so he stood up to prepare to leave. He dusted his hands lightly, turned to speak. End quote. All right, you two stay and have dinner. I and Appo's am heading back. End quote. After saying that, Da was about to step out of the door. Huyen quickly came out from the kitchen and called him back. End quote. Da, stay and have dinner with us. I've cooked and I also brought some rice to help. Today I've been working all day and going home alone, there's nothing to eat. End quote. Da hesitated for a moment, looked at Huyen. Seeing her sincere eyes, he couldn't bear to refuse. End quote. You are bothering you and the kids too much. End quote. Huyen shook her head, smiling. End quote. No, it's nothing. Just consider today as having dinner with us. End quote. Da remained silent for a moment, then nodded. End quote. All right, I'll stay. End quote. Micah happily ran over upon hearing this. End quote. Uncle Da, eat dinner with us and Mom, please. End quote. Da looked at the girl, smiling as he gently patted Micah's head. He turned back to help Huyen prepare the meal, and the small house gradually became warmer with the sound of talking and laughter during the peaceful afternoon. Da saw that Micah was still happy after a long day, so he took her small hand. Micah obediently followed Da to the backyard garden. The two of them walked past the green vegetable beds, where the evening sunlight was gradually descending. Pippi also slowly followed behind, happily watching everyone. As they were walking, Da suddenly remembered something. He reached into his shirt pocket and took out a small candy he had bought earlier. He gave it to Micah. Here, take this. Micah happily opened her eyes and accepted it. Thank you, Uncle Da. Da smiled and patted her head. Huyen is in the kitchen preparing the meal. She takes the eggs Da brought, washes them and cracks them into a bowl. The sound of hot oil sizzling fills the small kitchen as she adds the eggs to the pan. The aroma of fried eggs spreads throughout the room. Huyen carefully fries each piece until golden and then places them on a plate. Next, she scoops the bowl of pumpkin bone soup, the plate of fried eggs, and the chopsticks onto a bamboo tray. She gently wipes her hands, looks at the simple yet complete meal in front of her and smiles. Huyen looked at the sky, which was beginning to turn evening. She gently carried the small bamboo table out to the front of the garden, placing it on the cool, open ground. The wind from the fields carried the scent of plants and herbs, making the space in front of the house feel peaceful. Then Huyen went back into the kitchen. She carefully carried the prepared meal out and placed it on the bamboo table. On the tray was a hot, fragrant bone soup with pumpkin, and a plate of fried eggs for the evening meal. Da from the garden carried Micah inside. The girl happily hugged Da and Appo's neck. Looking around, the small house only had 2 bamboo chairs. Huyen asked Da to give Micah to her, and Da gently carried Micah and placed her on her lap. The girl obediently sat in Huyen and Appo's lap, while Da pulled the other bamboo chair to sit opposite the mother and child. The last light of the day softly covered the garden. The 3 of them sat around the small bamboo table, enjoying a simple but warm meal. Pippi was also nearby, occasionally lifting her head to look at everyone. I opened the lid of the pot, and the aroma of fresh rice wafted throughout the garden. Holding a wooden spoon, I took turns serving 3 full bowls of rice, then placed them in front of everyone. I used my chopsticks to pick up a large piece of bone with plenty of meat and gently placed it into Micah and Appo's bowl. Micah ate a lot to grow up quickly. Micah smiled politely and said, "Thank you, uncle." I picked up another piece of bone and placed it in Huyen and Appo's bowl. "You should eat a little more too. Today has been a long day, so you must be tired." Huyen looked at the piece of meat in her bowl and smiled softly. "Thank you, brother. You should eat too. You and Appo's. We've been working in the fields all day. It must be exhausting." I nodded and served myself some food. The 3 of us started the meal in a warm, cozy atmosphere. We ate while chatting about the day in Appo's work. Micah excitedly told stories about going up the hill with her mother to pick dragon fruit, riding a ferry across the river, and how today they sold almost all the dragon fruit at the market. I and Huyen listened attentively, occasionally laughing at the innocent stories of the girl. The sound of laughter echoed through the small garden, blending with the gentle evening breeze. The night gradually falls, and the sky is covered with a dark blue color. After dinner, Huyen stands up to light the oil lamp placed on the bamboo table. The small flickering flame emits a warm yellow light, illuminating the yard and the small house. Remembering the 2 dragon fruits she kept after selling them, Huyen goes to the kitchen to take them out. She holds a small knife and gently cuts each dragon fruit in half. The red flesh with tiny black seeds appears, looking very fresh and delicious. Huyen cuts the dragon fruit into bite-sized pieces, places them on a small plate and invites, "Anda Micah let and Appo's eat together." Micah happily takes a piece of dragon fruit, eating and smiling brightly. Da also takes a piece, smiling and thanking Huyen. The 3 of them gathered around the bamboo table under the oil lamp, enjoying sweet and refreshing dragon fruit while chatting about the day that had passed. Micah and Appo's laughter, Huyen and Da and Appo's simple stories blended into the quiet night of the countryside. Beneath the table, Pippi obediently lay resting, occasionally lifting her head to look at everyone before gently wagging her tail. The oil lamp continued to quietly shine in the small house, warming a peaceful evening. Amidst the rustic charm of the countryside, 3 people shared simple yet heartfelt moments, ending a long day with warmth and laughter. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Appo's mother and child, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a word of encouragement for the 2 of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.